Okay, so the next thing I want to add to the program, now that the menu is looping fine, I want something to actually happen depending on which option the user enters. So I would need my switch structure to make decision based on user input. And notice that that is going, it's going right here, which is inside this do while loop. So that's my do while loop. It's going inside because I need that to happen every time they make a different menu choice. So it has to go in there. Okay, so I have switch. I'm switching on the variable user menu input. And the possible cases are A, B, remember each case needs a break, okay, C, oops, it's always a colon after the case and a semicolon after the break. Case D, I'm going to put a case Q, and I'm also going to put a default case. So for when they enter an invalid option, that would be the default case. And in that default case, I would still want the menu to display again, but I would put a line that says, please enter a valid option. And then I'm going to need a system pause so they have a moment to read that before the menu redisplays. Okay. And just to test this, for test purposes only, I'm going to print out the capital letter of whatever the case is. And I'm just doing this to check my switch structure to make sure it works before I go to the trouble of adding more things to it. Okay, so there's our switch structure. We've got our cases, which are our possible values of the user input. Notice they're in single quotes because they're a character. And I'm going to see out the capital letter corresponding to what the user enters just to test this. Okay, so I'm going to enter A. Oh, and I did get a capital A. It was hard to see because the menu cleared the screen right away. B, C, D, Q. Yep, so that works. I didn't try the default, so I'm going to test that again. If I entered, say, Z, please enter a valid option, and then it asks me again. Oops, X, same thing. Quit. Okay. So we know that works. I'm going to comment these out then. That was code I just used for testing. And just to make sure that switch worked. So now what I'm going to do is add some of the functionality that I wanted in those cases. So case A, where's my PowerPoint? Okay, yeah, case A, that was when we wanted them to enter the room data, and we knew we wanted to do that using a function that has this declaration. So let's build that function. Remember, function declarations go at the top above the main program, and it says I've got a function called enter room data that's going to take in a string and a float by reference and return nothing. And then I have to make this function. So remember, function definitions go after the main program. So I'm all the way down at the end of my program. There's no semicolon at the end of that first line, and then I need the 2 brackets to define my function. This last bracket is the end of enter room data function. Okay, that just helps when you're scrolling through your program. So let me go back up. So in my main program, I'm going to need 2 more variables. I'm going to need a string, which is the room name, and I'm going to need a float, which is the room area. And these are variables that I want to exist within my main program and be available to anybody in the main program. Now, where we're getting these values from is actually from the user. When I've got to add to the top line of my menu function, that string that I'm taking in, I have to give it a name that is just used within this function. So I'm going to call it name, and then that float I'm going to call area. Okay, so to look at that, you didn't need these in the declaration, but in the definition you have to put some variable names in here. So I've got name and area, so that I can use them in here within the function itself, because they're going to hold whatever the user sends, and we have to give them names so that we're able to use them and keep them separate, of course. So how we're using, because we're getting them by reference, we're actually getting the location of a variable, and we want to use that variable to hold the room name and area. So I'm going to ask the user to enter, and I think first I should clear the screen. I'm going to do a system CLS, and then I want to ask the user to enter the room name, and we're going to save that in name, but it's really going to be saved in whatever variable we sent to the function, and these arrows need to go that way. And then we have enter the room area. Okay, so something to note is, notice I don't have any variables defined up here at the top of my function. Because because the two variables that I'm using, which are coming in here, are already declared here. So I don't have to redeclare them over here. It's good enough that they're here. So this name is getting used here, and it's getting used here. Because these are sent by reference, I'm not actually sending what's in a variable, I'm sending a variable location. So whatever the user enters is going to go into the location of the variable I send this function, and the same with the area. So let's look at how we call this function. So up in the main program, here we are. In option A, I'm going to call this function. Now remember, this function didn't return anything, but it takes name and area. I have to enter, what was it called? Oh yeah, enter room data. So the function's called enter room data. Because it doesn't return anything, I don't need a variable over on the side here to save any value, but I do have to send it a variable to store the room name in and a variable to store the room area in. So I've made these two variables up here already. So I'm going to send it room name and room area. I have to save it, or I have to send them in the order that the function is expecting them. So I have to send the name first, then the area. Otherwise, the area would try to be stored in the name, and that would cause issues, right? So remember, these are always in the same order that they are down here in the function definition, and same order as the declaration. So now when I send, let's look at the main program. In the main program, when we say string room name and float room area, the computer is actually saving space in memory, a space called room name and a space called room area. But they don't have any values yet, it's just reserved the space. When I send them to this function by reference, I'm not sending the values, and which is good because they don't have values anyway. But sending by reference means I'm actually sending the location of room name and the location of room area. That means when this function gets executed, I'm going to go down here, and the user enters some kind of name and some kind of area. So say they entered living room and 12. This name is actually holding the location of username because that's what we sent it. And this is actually holding the location of, not username, it was room name, and the location of room area. So those two spots in memory of room name and room area that were made in the main program would suddenly get the value living room and 12. Okay, so when you see this ampersand, that means you're sending the location of the variable that you send to the function. Okay, so here I want to test this function now, and in order to test it, I'm just going to put a cout here. Room name and out. I don't really care about the formatting of these because it's just for test purposes. Just to make sure the function worked and actually did change these variables in memory. Okay, so let's see what happens if we pick option A. Okay, so we said enter a choice A. It says enter the room name. I'm going to say living room. Enter the room area. See, if the room was 10 by 20, that would be 200. And that probably did work, but I couldn't see it because it disappeared too fast. So let me put a system pause under here. Okay, so I'm going to pick option A. It says enter the room name, living room, 200. And there we have room name, living room, room area, 200. Yes. So we know that it works. I'm going to quit. Okay, so I can comment out these lines again because they were just for test purposes. And I could delete them, but I'll just comment them out for now. So it's actually making our main program quite compact because we've just got this do and this switch and these functions that we're calling. So it makes the program actually very easy to read. You know, enter room data, display menu, we can see exactly what's going on in our program.